Alright, this is going to be a video which is on Henri Bergson's Matter and Memory, and I'm going to have a few of these. I read the first chapter again after not having read it in a while, and I have two videos I'll make. But first off, in the first chapter is called "Of the Selection of Images," and basically what he does, a lot of what he does is, he looks over realism and idealism and says that, we should not be doing philosophy by ways of either. And that he kind of discusses what matter is, what memory is, what perception is, pure perception at that. It's just pretty neat. So this video I'm going to discuss in the first chapter how he goes over this idea of realism and idealism. First of all, when you read Bergson and you see the word image, it's not referring to a representation. It's referring to just it's not an image in that there's that it's an image of something. It's an image in that you're just seeing it. It's there. Like my body is an aggregate of images. So, it's an aggregate of things that are perceivable. But it's kind of hard to just define that one word. But I think it's cool. I think it's a good idea to think about that in terms of thinking of them as phenomena without thinking of it in the content sense of a noumena being behind it. There's no noumena, and that's a reason why this is similar to phenomenology. It's a reason why Bergsonism is similar to that. So, my body is an object destined to move other objects. It is a center of action, and it cannot give birth to a representation. So that's one thing here. He's not a realist. He's not a idealist. The objects which surround my body reflect its possible action upon them. So all the images, objects, whatever you want to call them, are they're basically potentialities of how it can act upon them. So it's kind of like Heidegger's ready to hand, and where I have the way I see a hammer is as in what I can do with it. I can hammer nails into a wall or whatever. The way I see a book is my possibility of reading it. It's just like that. Trying to go through the main things here. I call matter the aggregate of images, so that's kind of a better idea of what images are. They're the aggregates. Matter is the aggregate of images, and perception of matter, the same images referred to the eventual action of one particular particular image. Perception of matter is this aggregate of images being referred to the eventual action. So he talks about thinking about your body with respect to centripetal and centrifugal nerves. My perception is that a function of these molecular movements, it depends upon them. So these molecular movements, in these different things here. Thus, matter is made into something radically different from representation, something which consequently we have no image. Over against a place consciousness empty of images of which we're unable to form any idea. The question is then not only how our perceptions are connected with the modifications of the gray matter. The problem widens. It might also be stated as follows: here is a system of images I term my perception of the universe, in which may be entirely altered by a slight change in a certain privileged image, my body. So it's kind of he's going to look at two systems. He's looking at realism and idealism as two different systems of images. Where in realism, there is no privileged image. There's no privileged center of action. It's all one system of, there's no privileged image where anything can act on anything else in really any way. And you can kind of think about the way we commonly understand that to the way he understands them, those things of realism and idealism. So realism is the idea that anything we see is objective and independent of our mind, and there's no creation of anything from our mind which we see. So every image, using it in Bergson's language, every image is independent of every other image. That is one system of images. The other system of idealism, which is like in the Bergson style, or Kantian, or Schopenhauer, or Fichte, or Hegel, or whatever. There's a privileged aggregate of image. What he calls the privileged image, or the privileged center of action, where the other images are I don't know if I want to use the word deduced, but it's deduced or somewhat, I don't know. I'll look at his definition. Here's a system of images which determine my perception of the universe, and which may be entirely altered by a very slight change in a certain privileged image, my body. This image occupies the center, but by it all others are conditioned. So, given the privileged image, the center of action, which is any of us, any aggregate of images, any body, is where all the other images are conditioned. All the other images in this idealist system are conditioned by the one privileged image. I'm just trying to help those who are watching this to understand this, in the way Bergson understands it, also in the way in which any common philosopher would, because not very many. I would say that Bergson is kind of someone that has read less than, he's read less than Husserl, less than a lot of philosophers, and it's kind of sad because Bergson is honestly one of my favorite philosophers, and kind of reading him, I just kind of like, oh, that's awesome, So I think we should study Bergson more than we do, and it's not taught in even upper level philosophy classes at the undergrad level, and I wonder, it's probably not taught so much at the grad level either, because a lot of the grad level is focused on analytic philosophy anyway. So, and this is definitely not that. This is, less common continental philosophy, so it's going to be read less. At each of its movements, everything changes as though by turn of a kaleidoscope. That's a nice analogy. Here on the other hand, are the same images, but referred to each one to itself, influencing each other, no doubt, but in such a manner that the effect is always in proportion to the cause. This is what I term the universe. How is it that these same images can belong at the same time to two different systems, one in which each image varies for itself, and in the well-defined measure that it is patient of real action of surrounding images, and another in which all images change for a single image, in the varying measure that they reflect the eventual action of this privileged image. Okay, so that's why he's saying, how can we think of images in these two systems? Those are the two systems: realism, idealism. And he says that neither are correct. And let's see, 27. question raised between realism and idealism becomes quite clear. What are the relations which these two systems of images maintain with each other? And it is easy to see that subjective idealism consists in deriving the first system from the second, materialistic realism in deriving the second from the first. So yeah, in the idealistic system, we derive the rest of the images from this privileged section, this privileged image. And in the realistic system, we derive the self, the privileged image, which is really not the privileged image here. We derive, consciousness from everything else. So it's just a matter of which way are you going to go? What are you going to derive from what? In idealism, as in realism, we posit one of the two systems and seek to deduce the other from it. See how it was right with the word deducibility. If you posit the system of images which has no center, in which each element possesses its absolute dimension of value, I see no reason why to the system should accrue a second, in which each image has an undetermined value subject to all the vicissitudes of a central image. 27 and 28. If we look closely at these two doctrines, we shall discover in them a common postulate, which we may formulate thus. Perception has a wholly speculative interest. It is pure knowledge. The whole discussion turns upon the importance to be attributed to this knowledge as compared with scientific knowledge. We will first simplify considerably the conditions under which conscious perception takes place. First fact, there's no perception which is not full of memories. So then we got into this idea of what perception is. So perception is the master of space in the exact measure in which the action is the master of time. So if he's not going to say that realism or idealism is correct, what does he say is correct? It is impossible to assume anything other than the aggregate of images. And he says that on History 7, I believe. So that's what basically this is. Like, we can't... I was looking there to see if there's anything more I wanted to say about that. So the question might be as to what does Bergson say if he's not going to go with realism or idealism. This is where he kind of, is somewhat similar to Husserl, because he says that nothing is impossible to assume anything other than the aggregate of images. It's impossible to assume anything other than a certain kind of, a certain kind of body or a certain kind of thing. An aggregate of images is a body, and it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that he's going in the idealist direction. It doesn't mean he's saying that there's a privileged center, because that would be assuming a little more, but if we can assume that there is an aggregate of images, then we can kind of talk a little bit more about perception. So and this is similar to Husserl's appliqué in that we're bracketing the natural attitude. We're not going to discuss, whether things in the world are mind dependent or not. We're just going to discuss the images and the aggregate of images as they are. To discuss it in the way that Bergson would. So what can we talk about here? We can talk about what presents itself to us. We can't, like idealism, kind of supposes more than we can really assume. It supposes that it's the problem with both realism or idealism is the illusion that we can deduce one system from the other. But just as assuming that saying that we can only assume the aggregate of images, then we are not really assuming any system, but just saying that this is really all we can assume, so we're going to move forward from that. That's a bit of what phenomenology does as well. So it's neat, Then we can talk about memory. We can talk about perception. We can talk about consciousness. We can talk about time. We can talk about past and future. We can talk about a lot of that stuff. We can also talk about what brain processes have to do with the actual acts of consciousness. Let's see, did I miss anything? You must then to engender perception, conjure up some deus ex machina, such as the materialistic hypothesis of the epiphenomenal consciousness, whereby you choose among all the images that vary absolutely that you posit to begin with, the one with which we term our brain, conferring the internal states of this image the singular and inexplicable privilege of adding to itself a reproduction, this time relative and variable of all the others. It is true that you afterwards pretend to attach no importance to this representation, to see in it a mere phosphorescence. All realism is thus bound to make perception an accident, and consequently a mystery. But inversely, if you posit a system of unstable images disposed about a privileged center, and profoundly modified by trifling displacements of the center, you begin by excluding the order of nature, the order which is indifferent of the point which we take our stand, and to the particular end from which we begin. You will have to bring back this order by conjuring up your turn a deus ex machina. I mean that you will have to assume by arbitrary hypothesis that some sort of pre-established harmony between things and mind, or at least between sense and understanding. It is science now that will become an accident, and its success a mystery. You can't then deduce the first system of images from the second, nor the second from the first. And these two antagonistic doctrines, realism and idealism, as soon as they decide to enter the same lists, hurl themselves from opposite directions against the same obstacle. Okay, if that's not beautiful writing, I don't know what is, honestly. Okay, that's basically where he's at. I'll probably make a video going more in depth into perception and memory and such, which is later in the chapter mostly. If you have a question about his position here, do let me know. These videos are for that purpose of you and I benefiting from learning.